Good evening. You're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Sanhedrin Daf Ches. We are starting about 3/4 of the way down on Daf Zayin Amud Beis, and we're starting on the line that begins with the words Lo Sa'le b'malos, and we're starting toward the end of that line. Why does the pasuk say Asher Tasim ve'ele hamishpatim Asher Tasim? Says the Gemara, it shouldn't say Asher Tasim. Asher Talam Demi Boile. What do you mean Tasim? It's the halachos that you teach. What do you mean the halachos that you place? Oh, Rabbi Yirmiyah, he explains, V'yitem Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Elu klei hadayonim. These are the tools. They are the kalim of the judges. What does this mean? Rav Huna ki abanafak ledina. When he would go to Beis Din and he was about to spend the day in court, what would he do? So the Gemara says, Amar Hachi, he would say to his attendant, he would say to his assistant, Afiku li mani chanusoi. Go get me the tools of my trade or the tools of my store, from the word chanus. Please go get them for me. Makel is a stick. Uritzua is a whip. V'shufra is a shofar. V'sandala is a sandal. So what's going on here? Thank you, Rashi, very, very much. Rashi says, Dibur Hamaskla, it's a little out of order because the Gemara says Makel first. But here the Gemara says Ritzua is Lamalkos. Ritzua is a whip that was used for Malkos for an Isser Doraisa. Makel is Lamakas Mardus Ad Sheach Zorbo. Makas Mardus is rabbinic lashes. Shofar is the Sham Tavanidui. The shofar would be blown when a person was put into Cherem. And Sandal is famously Lechalitza. These are the kalim, these are the artifacts of a Beis Din. And that is what Rav Huna would say when he would go to Beis Din. So that's what the pasuk means, Asher Tasim, that you're placing in front of me. What does that mean you're placing? In Pashat, that the mitzvahs are begeder talam deim. But what we're saying is that there are some klei zayin, there are some artifacts of a Beis Din. The pasuk says, "Vatzaveh shovtechem bo'ei sahi." What does that mean? Vatzaveh. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yochanan keneged makel uretzua tehes zaris. So Rashi says the word va'atzaveh is a very unique word. I didn't know this until today. Va'atzaveh, Rashi says, 15 lines from the bottom, a little bit more. Kol tzavah lashon ziruzhu. Who knew? So that's why he says va'atzaveh shovtechem b'isei. You should command them. No, you should tell them to be mizares. Okay. The next pasuk says Shema ben achechem ushvattem, that you should hear between brothers and you should judge. What does this mean? Amar Rav Chanina. Azhara leBeis Din shelo yishama divrei Baal Din kodem sheyavo Baal Din chavero. This is lemaisa. This is halacha lemaisa. A Beis Din is not allowed to hear one of the Baalei Din share their side of the story before the other person gets there. And as well, ve'azhara leBaal Din shelo yatim dvarav ledayan kodem sheyavo Baal Din chavero. And the Gemara says as well, not only should the Dayan not hear, but the Baalei Din should not even try to present. It's double. It's usher for the Dayan to hear, and it's usher for the Baal Din to present, unless all parties are present. They don't start any of the proceedings until everyone is there. Pari Beinami, the pasuk also says, Shema bein achechem. Here too, a similar type of language where shama is to make yourself heard among your brothers. Namely, as mentioned, we don't want any of the Baalei Din to give their preamble prior to the chaver, prior to his partner being there. It's interesting in logic why that would be true. I'm not exactly sure why, because the Dayanim are going to hear it in 2 minutes. Maybe he has to watch the reactions of the other Baal Din as Baal Din number 1 talks. Unclear from the Gemara itself. Rav Kahana Amar Mehacha, we learned this din about a Baal Din not presenting themselves first from lo tasi. Don't cause yourself to be lifted. Don't cause yourself to be heard. Ushvatem tzedek, what does that mean? Amar Reish Lakish tzadek es hadin ve'achar kach hadchehu. This is going back to a topic we spoke about yesterday. These Gemaras are pretty choppy in their flow. A lot of these Agaritas seem to just kind of be almost like snippets that could have been categorized differently or placed differently. But here the Gemara says, Tzadek es hadin, get the din right. You're not sure what the din is, go to the Svarim Shrank and go look things up and go make sure that you're clear. And then you do this. When I was about 19 years old, I was at someone's house for Shabbos and the light was left on in the fridge. So I was 19, I thought I knew how to learn. I barely know how to learn now. So I took a Shmir Shabbos Kilchasam. I'm like, I got this. I looked up the halacha and Chatchehu, I thought I knew the din, and I said, oh, I understand. And the halacha and Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa was you should have a katan pull the teka, which is a plug, out of the wall. Okay, the fridge will be fine until the end of Shabbos. This was Shabbos lunch. It was a handful of hours. That way, when the kid turns off the fridge, he unplugs it, then the light won't go on anymore. The katan did it. It's litzarach. It's a shvus litzarach mitzvah, and it's a katan. No problem. But I thought that a teka was a light bulb at the time, and I was wrong. So my mom is broke halacha. But I didn't know. So that's why I shouldn't be a dayan at the age of 19. There are exceptions to that rule. I am not one of them. But the point is over here, tzadekes hadin, once you know that you're right, then chatchehu, then go act upon it and go tell Baal Din X, your chayiv or your zakai, whatever the din is. Ben ishuvein achiv, between brothers, between a man and his brothers, what does this mean? Skipping the parentheses. Amar Rabbi Yehuda afilu bein bayis la'aliyah. We should even make distinctions between a lower floor and an upper floor. We should be very exacting in the din. Let's say the din is yachloku. We need to split the property, but the lower floor, it's an entry-level floor. Perhaps it's worth more, or perhaps the penthouse is worth more. Whichever the case may be, whichever one is worth more, they have to give cash to the other person. What does the rest of the pasuk mean? Uven geiro, Amar Yehuda afilu bein tanur lekirayim. Forget about the floors of the apartment that are very expensive, even between a stove and an oven. All right, these things are even fewer dollars. We should still be careful. What does the pasuk mean when it says lo sakiru panim b'mishpat? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lo sakirehu. You should not show recognition to a person that you like. And on the flip side, Rabbi Lazar Omer, lo sinkirehu. You should not plot against someone who you don't like. Namely, you have to have integrity when you're being a Baal Din. And sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes that's really hard. And the Gemara gives an example right away where somebody felt some strong feelings during a case, during a Din Torah. Ushbezichne de Rav Acha, excuse me, Ushbezichne de Rav Asa Lakame Ladina. It's not my regular Gemara. I'm not used to the font here. This is a little typo by me. The Rav's host, Rav was a dayan. Rav's host, where Rav was living, his landlord, came in for a din Torah. Amar lo, he says to him, Lav ushbezichni at. Don't we know each other? I'm your landlord. Amar lo in. Amar le dina isli. He says to Rav, I have a din Torah. I want you to help me. Amar le, Rav appropriately recused himself from the case, turning to the top of Daf Chesed Aleph. Psil nalach medina. I'm not allowed to do this. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi seems simple, but there's a nuance here. Psil nalach shehiz kartani tovascha. I remember that which you did, which was good for me. Another beautiful sensitivity in halacha. You have to recuse yourself as a dayan, even if there's just a positive act that took place between two people. I don't know how this works in a bezdin. The dayanim know most of the community one way or the other. They know people. Nevertheless, that's the din. Amar le Rav Kahana, Pok daine chazye dahava kagois be. Rav said to Rav Kahana, this guy is walking around all confident that he thinks that because he knows me, Rav said, that he is going to get off scot-free, he's going to win the case. So Amar le, so then Rav Kahana says to this guy, look, I know you know Rav. That's not how this works. Itzaisa, tzaisa. If you're going to listen to the psak, Givaldik. Ve'ilo. And if you don't, then mafikna lach Rav me'onach. Then I'm going to remove Rav from your corner. A little bit difficult to know what that means, but if you take a look in Rashi says that it's actually not so complicated. The language looks a little difficult in the Gemara. Rashi says on the second line, mafikna lach Rav me'onach. Odiacha, I'm going to let you know, she'ein Rav yachol l'sayacha, the mishmetin alach. He won't be able to help you because I'm going to excommunicate you. So that's what the Gemara means over here. The next din of the Gemara, Daf Chesed Aleph, 4 lines down. Kakaton kagadol tishmaun. The dayanim should listen to small cases and to big cases. Amar Reish Lakish sheyehei chaviv alecha din shel pruta kedin shel me'amana. You should be careful about adjudicating a case that's worth 10 cents. And you should be careful about working on a case that's worth $1 million. So says the Gemara, yeah, I mean, like what? Of course. We know if we steal even 1 penny, you're still a thief. You're still a ganav. So the my hilchasa, the Gemara wants to know, what are you trying to teach me, Reish Lakish, with this din of kakaton kagadol? that I have to ensure that I, as a dayan, am careful with the cases that are worth 10 cents as well as the cases that are worth $1,000,000. That when it comes to the less expensive cases, I still need to be ma'ayin and I still need to paskin correctly. Pshita, 100%. Says the Gemara, that can't be it. Obviously, we have to treat all cases equally in regards to right and wrong. Okay, you're right. It's true that one case is a $1,000,000. It doesn't matter. People with integrity don't do that. Ella, says the Gemara, le'akdume. Says the Gemara, what it means is in regards to first come, first served. Let's say that the first case on the docket was a case of a $36 claim difference. For one guy, that's money. For another guy, that's a throwaway. That's his cup of coffee at Starbucks. So what the Gemara is saying is that when we have a docket, we don't change the order of the cases based on how much money is at stake. The pasuk had said, "Lo sagur mipnei ish ki hamishpat lelokimu," skipping the parentheses. What does this mean? Amar Rabbi Chama, Reb Chanina. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem says, "Lo dayan l'rishayim shenotlen mizeh mamon v'nostem lezeh shelo kedin." It's bad enough that we have people, a dayan Russia, who's taking money from one guy, giving it to another person, which is really not the right halacha. Not only that, says Hashem, but shematrichen osi la'achzer mamon lebaylav. Now I need to go do a whole redo of how I plan to run the world. I had my sheet, I had my script, but now I need to change things. The pasuk says, "V'adavar asher yikshem mikem." What is this talking about? Amar Reb Chanina v'yitem Reb Yoshia. Al davar zeh ne'enash Moshe. Moshe had said when he was building the structure of Dayanim, where you'd have Sarei Alafim v'Sarei Meos v'Sarei Asaros. Remember, he built a structure based on Yisro's advice to minimize the pressure on him because everyone was coming to him. It's just not practical. So he built systems. He built a court system of lower courts and upper courts. But his language over here is he said to everybody, "V'adavar asher yikshem mikem," bring it to me. The cases that are difficult to paskin, bring them to me. So says the Gemara, "Al davar zeh ne'enash Moshe." Moshe actually got punished because this schmecks a little bit of haughtiness. Guys, Chebra, if you don't know the answer, come to me. I'll take care of you. Shene'emar ve'ikra Moshe es mishpatan lifnei Hashem. What we see over here is that the mishpat wasn't Moshe's mishpat. This was talking about the case of the Benos Tzalafchad, where they were only girls and they wanted to have the chelik and the Yerusha, sugyas that we've discussed at length. So says the Gemara, who does the Gemara refer to the din of Benos Tzalafchad as? It says, es mishpatan, their din. So it's a little slap on the wrist that Moshe should have used a more gentle language. Maskeflar of Nachman Reitzak, miksi ve'ashmiachem. I don't understand. You can't really say that Moshe was being a Baal Kaiva. He didn't say, and I will tell you what I know. He said, Ushmativ ksiv, I'll make sure that you hear. Igmir no gemirna. If I know the answer, I'll tell you. Ve'ilo, azilna v'ugemirna. Then I'll go find out. I'll ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll go look it up in the Beis Medrash. But it wasn't Gaiva. Ella, says the Gemara, what's going on in this pasuk? V'hadavar asher yikshem mikem. So says the Gemara, a third of the way down on Daf Ches Amud Aleph. Ella kedetanya, ru'uya parshas nachalos shetikosei v'alidei Moshe Rabbeinu. Really, it should have been that the parsha of Nachalos was written in the name of Moshe. Really, they were the ones who were the beneficiaries, not because of his gaiva, but just because they brought the case to bear. And parshas Moshe Rabbeinu. And similarly, the case of Mekoshesh Eitzim. This is the case in the end of Parshas Shlach, second or third Shabbos that the Jewish people were mitzvah to keep Shabbos. A yid went out into the field and he was Mekoshesh Eitzim. He gathered twigs together. Some of the poskim discuss, can you play 52 card pickup on Shabbos? Is that like similar being Mekoshesh gathering or Ma'amer, similar types of dinim? Usually we assume it's by Gidule Karka, only things that are out in the field, maybe, and they have to presumably, maybe even according to some, not ever have been moved. If 20 apples fall from the tree and you gather them, that's Ma'amer. Mekoshesh Eitzim, if you see twigs and you gather them, that's Mekoshesh Eitzim. So says the Gemara, it should have been written in Moshe Rabbeinu's name, but once the Avarian did his Aveira, then things were written on his accord. So now we have one thing that's written in the positive. The Benos Tzalafchad were right. Cain Dovros, they were right. So then the Torah refers to the dinim of Nachala that Moshe ended up determining from HaKadosh Baruch Hu in their name. And in the case of Mekoshesh Eitzim, it was for the person who was the Avarian. Then the Gemara tells us a beautiful principle, a beautiful idea. One we've seen a few times in Shas. I see three on the side here. From Yoma, Shabbos, and Baba Basra, Lelamedcha, Shemegalgal and Chova al Yedei Chayiv, Uschus al Yedei Zakai. That when there is a chova to take place, it travels through a person who's already chayiv, and when there's a schus to take place, it travels through someone who is meritorious. The Gemara says halfway down on Daf Chesamar Aleph, see, we have two psukim that seem to indicate two different mitzvos. V'atzaves shovtechem bo'esahi. I will give a commandment to your judges. Uchsiv, it also says v'atzaveh eschem bo'esahi. What are the two different things that are going on in these psukim? Seems like there's two tzivuyim. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rav Simlai. First of all, Atzhara l'tzibor shetehei emas dayan aleihem. One is that the tzibor has to have fear of dayanim. Baruch Hashem, I think that's the case. I can tell you the handful of times over the years that Rabbi Reese I called Rabbi Reese to ask a shaila. I think I shared the shaila yesterday about this baby who was uncircumcised, and should he have atafas tambris? He said no. Nacha shaila today. But anyways, yesterday when Rabbi Reese called me back, I popped out of my seat. He's a dayan. It's uncomfortable that he's calling me in the first place. So it's not halachically the case, but I stood up. I didn't realize I was standing up until I reflected afterward. That's emas dayan aleim. We should have a little yira of the dayanim of our community. Not a yira in a bad way, a yira in a good way, in a level of respect. And as well, what's the second va'atzavev azhar l'dayan sheyispol es hatzibor? Ooh, this is a big one. The dayan has to tolerate the tzibor. Now that's not always easy. A lot of the cases that are dinei Torah are litigious people. Some of them are wonderful claims and they belong in a bezdin. Some people are just unfortunately difficult to deal with. And the din is that a dayan has to have the savlanus, sheyispol, he has to have the patience, the wherewithal to tolerate this person. Ad kama, says the Gemara, how much patience does a dayan have? Who knew that we could measure patience? If only. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chanan, v'itema Rav Shabtai, kasher yisa umanes hayonik, just like a mother nurses. What does that mean? When does a mother nurse? Whenever the baby wants, that's when the mother nurses. How much patience does a dayan have to have? A dayan should have enough patience to always fulfill the needs of the people. A very, very, very high level. As we know, some people in the world aren't as pleasant. Ksiv, we have one pasuk that says, Ki ata tavo, uchsiv ki ata tavi, that you should come and you should be brought. Amar Rav Yochanan, Amar lo Moshe li Yoshua. I don't understand how these two languages make sense. Let's figure them out. So one of them was ata v'hazakenim shebador imayim. One of them was ki ata tavo, you will come. Moshe talking to Yoshua, when you come to Eretz Yisrael with the elders of your generation. And then the second one was tavi, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was talking to Yoshua 2/3 of the way down. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu tol makil v'hach al kod kadam. Take your stick, hit people over the head. Daber echad lidor. We only get one great leader per generation. Ve'ein shnei dabarin lidor. We don't have two leaders. It's not Yoshua and Moshe. Yeah, you can't have an overlap of leadership. It's too confusing for people. So what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying is that there's a difference. There's a line in the sand when Moshe hung up his cleats. So then Yoshua took over. Going back to the sugya of Shlosha, says the Gemara also about 2/3 of the way down. First word on the line is Sheni. Tana, we have a Mishnah or a Brisa, Zimun Bishlosha. When we hear the word Zimun, we think about Birkas HaMazon, but the Gemara says, Mai Zimun. Ilema Birkas HaMazon. If you think that when this Brisa says Zimun is Bishlosha, that can't be, because V'hatanya, Zimun is one language, Ubirkas Zimun Bishlosha. So Birkas Zimun is Bishlosha, which is Rabbi Sain of Arech. Then what's Zimun? Can't be the same thing. V'chitema Prusha Kamafaresh. And if you think that the Brisa is just explaining itself, the Brisa said Zimun Birkas Zimun Bishlosha. My Zimun Birkas Zimun. Maybe no, that can't be either. Ratanya Zimun Bishlosha Birkas Zimun Bishlosha. Black on white, multiple Brisas. And we see that Birkas Zimun and Zimun are not the same thing. Elamai Zimun. What then is Zimun? So it says the Gemara, Azmune Ladin. When the Bezdin summons someone to come to Bezdin, that has to be done with 3 people. That's what it means. It says Zimun. Kiha de Amar Rava. Hani Beitz Lasa Daine de Yasve. 3 Dayanim were sitting at the CRC. V'azil Shlicha de Beidina. They sent their messenger, whoever that is, to go issue a summons to someone. The Amar mipuma dechad lo amar klum. If the shliach said only Rabbi Reese wants you to come in, Rabbi Raka and Rabbi Kraft don't care if you come in. So lo amar klum, that doesn't mean anything. He'd never be put into cherem for not listening to Bezdin. That would never happen. Ad Amar mishmei dekulu, until it's said in the name of all three dayanim, Rabbi Reese, Rabbi Raka, Rabbi Kraft, whoever the dayanim are, they demand of you to show it. Then you're absolutely obligated. So zimun, the hazmana to bring someone to Bezdin, needs to be done with three people. And Hani Mili, when are we strict about this rule that you need three and one doesn't work? Hani Mili below Yom Hadadina. On Sundays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, which in the smaller communities was not a day for a Bezdin. Aval b'yom hadadina, but when it comes to a day like a Monday or a Thursday, which Ezra was mitaken that those were going to be the days, so there the Gemara says les lan ba. There we don't have the rule of zimun bishlosha, and even if one dayan were to be mizamein, or to issue a hazmana for someone to come to Bezdin, a summons, the halacha is that that person should show up in Bezdin. Just a good general rule. If the Bezdin issues you a summons, you should go to Bezdin because they can put you into cherem if you don't show up. No aliyahs, no kibudim, nothing. You're not welcome into shul. It's very strict. Okay, we're at the two dots, two lines before the wide lines toward the bottom of Daf Ches Amud Aleph. Let's continue. The next Amud is not so long, probably just a little bit more learning, maybe 10 minutes or so. Says the Gemara, Tashlumei Kefel, we had learned in our Mishnah that the din of Tashlumei Kefel requires to have three dayanim. Says the Gemara, Shalach le Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda le Rav Nachman bar Yaakov, Yilamdenu Rabbeinu, Dine Knasos Bekama. How many dayanim do we need when we're dealing with a knas? So the Gemara says it's a klutz kasha. We know from our Mishnah, we spoke about this. Chatzi nezek is a knas according to some. So says the Gemara, my kami poile. What, I don't even know what you're asking. Says the Gemara, ha'anan bishlosha. We already learned in our Mishnah at the open of this Masechta of Dine Mamanis bishlosha, Daf Beis. We learned that it's bishlosha. So the Gemara says, you're right. I wasn't asking that question of do we need three. I know how many people we need in general when we have three hedyotos. What I'm asking is that even though the Mishnah requires three hedyotos, what if ela yachid mumche kami baile? I'm asking if there's one person who is a mumche in order to adjudicate cases of knasos, not regular mamanis, but knasos. A knas is, for example, motzi shemra, the Torah says is 50 shekel. The punishment of 50 shekel is not a mathematical equation based on the damages performed. It's a prescribed amount that the Torah demands that you pay. That's a knas. So the Gemara says for a knas, we know you need three hedyotos, three regular guys. But what if you had one guy who's a mumche? You had Rabbi First. So can Rabbi First make this din alone? Do we say dain dine knasos olo? Do we say that a yachid mumche can be a dayan by himself in a case of knasos? Amar le tani tua. So Rav Nachman bar Yaakov said back to Rav Nachman bar Chizda, hey, we have a Mishnah that deals with this explicitly, and here's what it looks like. 8 lines from the bottom. Tashlumei kefil v'tashlumei arba v'chamisha b'shlosha. What do we see in our Mishnah? This is our Mishnah on Daf Beis. We see that when it comes to kefil and when it comes to daled v'hei, what is the determining number of dayanim? 3. So we see no distinction of Yachid Mumche, and therefore we assume that that's the case. My Shlosha, Ilema Shlosha Hedyoto, says the Gemara, it can't be that when our Mishnah says that Kefil and Dalet Vehei have 3 dayanim, that it's talking about regular Hedyotos. Ha'amar avuch de avuch, avua de avuch, your father's father said, Mishmei de Rabba, filu asar vehein Hedyotos, psulun l'dinei knosos. No. 10 hedyotos, no hedyotos can do. Any number of hedyotos would be puzzled to pass in a case of knasos. When we deal with knasos, we need something different. Ella must be mumchen v'kamer shtolsha. So therefore, we asked and we answered. We wanted to know, can we have a yachid mumche pass in a case of knasos? The Gemara says, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Even if you had 10 hedyotos, they couldn't pass in a case of. They couldn't pass in a case of dinei knasos. Where do we see that 3 hedyotos work? There are cases. We allow it for Ataras Nadarim on Erev Rosh Hashanah. But here, by a case of Knasos, you have to have 3, and the 3 have to be Mumche. At the 2 dots, 5 lines before the bottom of the page, the Gemara is puzzled. Why would you say that a case of Motzi Shemra requires 23? Our Mishnah taught us that typically 23 is set for Dinei Nefashos. So we went through a whole lengthy mission about what's what. So why would you say that a case of Motzi Shemra requires 23 dayanim? After all, the man saying out loud, Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, gets married on a Sunday night. He's together with his wife, and he recognizes B'shas Tashma Shemitah that she has no besulim. So he goes to Beis Din on Monday morning and says, Pesach Pasuach Matzasi. My wife is not a besula. So why is that dinei nefashos? So says the Gemara, "My have, I don't understand." Omar Ula, this is a big machlokes amoraim as to what's going on here, as to why we need 23. Ula gives the first answer. Omar Ula b'chosheshin lulaz kamiflage. He says we're worried about the ripple effect of the rumors. If the husband goes into Beis Din on Monday morning and says Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, so rumors travel. Rav Meir Savar ein chosheshin l'raz v'rabbanan l'laz v'rabbanan sarei chosheshin l'laz. Rav Meir says, I'm not so worried about people talking. I don't know where he lived. That's not how our community works, unfortunately. We talk. We have big mouths. And the Rabbanan say, I am choshesh for laz, and that's how we paskin in Shulchan Aruch. This halacha can be found in Shulchan, it's actually quoted in the Rambam, I should say, in Hilchos Sanhedrin, that we are concerned about the rumors. So what the Gemara is saying is like this. A man shows up to Beis Din on a Monday morning and says, I just got married. I noticed that my wife is not a basula. So according to Rav Meir, this doesn't require 23 people. That's why Rav Meir in our Mishnah says shlosha in the case of Mosi Shemra. But according to the Shita that we do require 23, the concern of the Rabbanon is that chayshinan lalaz, choshishan lalaz, we're concerned that people are going to hear about it, and then maybe Taka Dayanim will show up and she'll be put to death based on that. So therefore, we're choshishin lalaz, and therefore we need 23 people for Motzi Shemra. Not because of what's happening right now, but because of what's happening potentially down the road. Rava Omar, 3 lines from the bottom, I completely disagree with Ula. Kule alma lalaz lo chayshinan. That's not what Rav Meir and the Rabbanan are arguing about. Everyone agrees that we're not concerned about a rumor that will lead to her death. Says the Gemara, V'hacha, b'chosheshin nechavodan shal rishonim kemiflage. Here, the reason why we need to hold on to the 23 dayanim is because they started in the case as 23. V'hacha b'mayaskinon. What was the actual case? It wasn't a case of Motzi Shemra that demanded it because of dinei nefashos, but rather kegon deichniv bei esren utzlasa lemeidan dinei nefashos. They really did show up to adjudicate a different case of murder. Ruvain killed Ploni. That's what they came to adjudicate. The Ivdor, and the case fell through. Let's say one of the Balei didn't show up. The Omar Lahu, and then someone then said to the 23, Dainu li miha dinei mamanis. And here we have the machlokes Rav Meir and the Rabbanan. Rav Meir says, no, you can disband the 23. We don't need them anymore. The 23 was there for dinei nefashos. The dinei nefashos case didn't work out. Fine, goodbye. You only need 3 for the case of mamanis. However, according to the sheet of the Rabbanan, we're concerned that there's a lack of kavod for the Rishonim. There's a lack of kavod for the first 20 of the 23 people who showed up that we're now kicking out. Once they're there, we tell them that they should adjudicate this case even of mamanis afal pi, that it's not really be'ikaron a requirement to have 23 people for mamanis. But once you brought them together for the dinei mamanis case, the fact that the dinei mamanis case disbanded doesn't mean that we should not lean on them for this case. It's not nice. It's not good midos. So says the Gemara. That brings us to the top of Daf Chesam and Beis with a kasha. The Gemara says, Meisvei, we have a brisa, which is actually a tosefta in this masechta. V'chachamim omrim tavu mamon b'shlosha. If there's a claim of money, we need 3. And tavu nefashos, if there's a claim of nefashos, a case of dinei nefashos, says the Gemara, be'esrim u'shlosha. Now, remember that we have a machlokas between Rava and Ula. Ula was of the opinion that the machlokas of Meir and the Rabbanon was whether or not we're choshesh and lalaz. Rava says we're only choshesh l'rishonim. So that's their 2 shitas. That's our chazara. So says the Gemara, Bishlama li Rava, or possibly Rava, which is a little difficult to say Rava considering that the previous Gemara says Rava. But let's just read what the Gemara says here. Bishlama li Rava tavu mamon tchil b'shlosha, tavu nufashos tchil b'shlosha, afilu mamon be'esrim b'shlosha. I understand why Rava would say that once we know that the case is one where we don't even need 23 anymore, but because we're concerned about the covet of the Rishonim, we're not going to kick them out. They should stick around even for a Dinei Mamonis case. Ela le'ula kasha. But according to Ula, who says it's a machlokes of Laz, what does that have to do with anything? We're talking about Mammon now. So that's a kasha. So how do we understand Ula? Ula's opinion seems to have been blown out of the water. The Gemara says, no, it hasn't. 5 lines down on Daf Chesamid Beis, heading to the last line on the page. Amar Rava, Ani, Rava says, me, Ve'ari shebechabura, or I should say, I, and the lion of our group, Targimna. We can explain it to you. Ummanu, who was the lion of Rav? Just the fact that Rav is saying that is a compliment. Who was the Arisha bechabura? Reb Chia bar Avin. Hacha b'maya skinan. What was the case that we're talking about over here according to Ula? It says the Gemara, the case of Ula is like this. Shehevi habal edim shezinsa. The edim that were there were brought by the husband. The husband knew that 2 men saw his wife being mizana. The Hevi ha'av and her father found edim vehezimum le'edei habal. So we have a case of Hazama, which we haven't spoken about yet in this Masechta, but we've spoken about Edim Zomamin, and the second pair of Edim that the father of the bride found were Huzam. They made the previous pair of Edim by saying, Imanu Hayisem. How could you, Reuven and Levi, give testimony that my daughter was Mizana? I was with you in Panama. You guys are done. There's no way this could be you. And then, really, what's the case we're talking about now? Because they're Edim Zomamin, we're no longer talking about a din of Chaf Gimel, of Esrim Mishlosha, because Edim Zomamin. So therefore, Ba Legabos Mamon Mibal Bishlosha, over Makom Nefashos Be'esrim Mishlosha. That really what's going on over here is that her father is trying to collect money when there are 3 people, but had it been that there were 23 people there, then he would keep the 23 people, because it's a case of Dinei Nefashos potentially. And another shita for tonight in regards to this case of Rav Meir and the Rabbanon, and we're a third of the way down on Chesamid Beis. Omar Abaye Omar Tekule Alma Chayshinan Lalas. Our answers are across the board here. Really, we are concerned about rumors, and it very well could be that if a man goes into Bezdin on a Monday morning and claims that his wife is not of a Basula, that it could lead to her death. Umishum Kvodam Shel Rishonim as well. It's also a concern that once we've brought together the Bezdin of Chav Gimel, even if during the case it becomes clear that we're no longer talking about Dinei Nefashos, we still need to hold on to the Dayanim. Hacha b'maya skinan. What is the case? Kigon de'asru ba stam, where the woman who Taka did something wrong, she got hasra. As we all well know, hasra is a formal warning that Eidim have to give about the crime that a person is going to do. If Eidim don't give a warning, then she'll never receive a capital punishment or a Bezdin punishment. No lashes, you need asra for lashes, you need asra for all of the capital punishments. So the problem is, the asruba, they did give her a warning, but they only did so stam. They didn't tell her what form of death she was going to get, had it been that she was to die. And v'hai tana hu detanya, this is like the following brisa. Ush'ar kol chai v'misos shebetorah, other than, and it's not referenced here in the Gemara what the actual case was. Ush'ar means all the other ones. The case that was discussing was a mesis, a person who causes another person to do avodah zara. Ush'ar kol chai v'misos shebetorah ein memisin osam el be'eda uve'edim v'hasra v'ad she'odu shu chai v'misa bebezdin. You need all the details in the hasra, otherwise no capital punishment. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad she'odu be'ezim misa hu shenerag. Rabbi Yehuda is the point that we are trying to show over here, is that we still will hold on to the 23 in the case of Abaye, because even though the Hasra was missing, because the Eidim didn't tell her how she would die if she was caught, but nevertheless, even though the case is no longer capital punishment, but we are choshesh for the Kvodan Shel Rishonim. Last but not least for tonight is the Shita of Rav Papa. Rav Papa Amar Hacha Be'isha Chavera Askinan. We're dealing with a woman who's a Chavera. Here, this language means that she is a very, very knowledgeable woman. The Kamiflage Beplugta de Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Huda V'Rabbanan. And the Machlokas over here is very similar to the Machlokas of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, and the Rabbanan de Tanya. The Brisa says 3 lines from the bottom. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Huda Omer Chaver Ein Sarich Hasra. If the person who is doing a capital crime, the Eidim mess up on the warning and they forgot to say the right kind of warning, says the Gemara that the only reason why Eidim teach and share the Hasra with the person who's about to do an Aveira, the only reason that's true is to make sure that the guy himself knows the difference between a Shogeg and a Mezid. But if the guy's a Chaver, he's a Talmud Chacham, who cares about the Hasra? So that would be a nafkamina in the previous brisa as to whether or not we require, like Rabbi Huda holds, Shiodu be'ezim misahu nerag, according to some shitas in the Tanaim, ein sarach hasra, lefi shelo nitna hasra, el lahavchen, ben shogeg lemezid. In Yirtzeh Hashem, tomorrow we'll pick up with Daf Tes. Daf Tes is not so long. Tomorrow's Thursday. And in Yirtzeh Hashem, we'll get to learn much of Daf Yud Amud Aleph as well. And then on Shabbos, we'll pick up with Yud Amud Beis and Yud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.